I was thinking about this the other day. Usually when we talk about starting a new job, there's this underlying, almost childlike expectation that you're going to get clear instructions.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like, think about opening a brand new board game. You take the lid off the box, you lay out the cardboard, and sitting right there on top is this little printed booklet. And it tells you exactly how many spaces to move, what constitutes a foul, how you earn points, and, most importantly, how you actually win the game.
Right. And there is a profound psychological comfort in knowing those parameters.
Yeah.
As humans, we just crave structured environments. We want the boundaries defined in black and white because it removes the cognitive load of guessing.
Exactly. You just follow the steps.
Yeah, you roll the dice, you move your piece, you collect your salary. The anxiety of the unknown is just, completely neutralized by the rules.
But then, and this is where it gets crazy, you graduate or you get a big promotion and you actually step foot into a real corporate office, specifically an American corporate office.
Right.
And suddenly you realize that the little rule book they handed you during orientation is essentially blank.
It's a totally blank slate.
Literally, it tells you, where the fire exits are and maybe how to log into the HR portal, but that's it. Meanwhile, you're looking around the floor and everyone else is playing this incredibly high-stakes game at lightning speed.
Yeah, they're making moves you don't even see.
Exactly. They are making all these complex social moves, advancing their pieces, and you realize they are operating by a strict, rigid set of rules that absolutely nobody bothered to write down.
It induces a state of professional vertigo.
Professional vertigo. I like that.
Well, it's true. You can possess flawless technical skills.
Yep.
You might know how to write the code or balance the ledgers better than anyone else in the building, but the environment itself feels like a puzzle with missing pieces. You're playing chess, but you don't know how the knight moves.
And that feeling of professional vertigo is exactly what we are getting into today. So, welcome to the deep dive. We are unpacking a stack of materials today that, on the surface, might seem a little unconventional for a deep dive into corporate sociology.
It is a bit unusual, yeah.
Right, because we are actually pulling from a transcript of a C2 Advanced Learning English program. Now, for those listening who might not know, C2 is the highest possible level of English proficiency.
Right, it's mastery.
Yeah, mastery. So this source is specifically designed for international professionals, expats, and ESL learners, people who already have pristine, fluent English skills, but are trying to decode the invisible machinery of the American corporate workplace.
Which is, what makes this document an incredibly powerful, almost subversive lens for our discussion.
Subversive how?
Well, think about it. When you are forced to explain a culture to someone completely on the outside, you can't rely on shared assumptions. You are forced to articulate the invisible forces, the micro behaviors, and the silent expectations that everyone born on the inside just takes for granted.
You have to spell it all out.
Exactly. It exposes the framework.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because as we read through this transcript, it became overwhelmingly clear that the insights here are not just for ESL learners.
Oh, not at all.
They serve as a perfect, sometimes uncomfortable mirror for anyone tuning in right now. Whether you are an immigrant adjusting to a new country, or, someone born and raised in the American Midwest trying to figure out why you keep getting passed over for promotions, this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely.
We are moving way beyond mere technical competence today. We aren't talking about your spreadsheet skills. We are focusing entirely on cultural literacy.
And I'd argue that cultural literacy is the most valuable, yet least taught currency in the modern economy.
It really is.
It's the hidden key to actually thriving rather than just barely surviving in your career. Competence keeps you from getting fired. Cultural literacy is what actually gets you into the room where the big decisions are made.
So, to the listener, think of us as your unofficial corporate translators today. And let's start at the very beginning. Because before you even step foot in an office, before you even open your mouth in a Monday morning stand-up meeting, your very first impression is almost always digital.
Yep, the inbox.
The inbox.
Yeah.
So let's look at how the American email sets the stage for literally everything else in this ecosystem.
The digital handshake. It is fascinating how much sociological data is packed into a simple email greeting. And, well, it's where a staggering number of global misunderstandings begin.
Right, and the source material brings up this brilliant contrast. It gives an example of a highly formal, incredibly respectful email greeting that is completely standard and, in fact, required in many parts of the world.
Do you have the quote?
Yeah, I've got it right here.
Sure.
It goes, "Dear respected sir, I hope this message finds you in the best of health and spirits."
Let's pause and look at the intention behind those words.
Okay.
In many high-context global cultures, parts of Asia, the Middle East, even parts of Southern Europe, that level of formality is a strict requirement.
It's not optional.
Not at all. It serves a vital social function. It shows deference, it honors the established hierarchy, and it builds a foundation of interpersonal respect before any transactional business is even considered.
So the relationship comes first?
The relationship comes before the task, always.
And if you skip that in certain countries, you are basically slapping the recipient in the face. You're treating them like a vending machine.
Exactly.
But then the transcript completely contrasts that with the American standard. An American executive, even a CEO, opens an email with, hi, Sarah, or maybe, hey, team, and then instantly, literally in the very next sentence, hits you with the demand. Hi, Sarah, need the Q3 numbers by noon.
The psychology behind this American approach is what we need to isolate. When an international professional uses that formal, dear respected sir, they're earnestly trying to show immense respect. They're trying to do the right thing.
Right.
But in American corporate culture, excessive formality fundamentally backfires.
Yeah.
Instead of showing respect, it creates distance.
Distance. That is the perfect word for it. Because when I get an email that starts with, dear respected sir, it makes me feel like I'm talking to a Victorian time traveler.
Or a spam bot.
Yes, or an automated spam bot, not a colleague I'm supposed to be collaborating with. It feels incredibly alienating.
And to an American manager, an overly formal email signals a severe lack of fluency in workplace norms. It essentially broadcasts, I am an outsider who doesn't understand the rhythm of how we do things here.
Wow. Just from an email meeting.
Just from the greeting. Because in the United States, there is a massive cultural premium placed on efficiency. This goes all the way back to the Industrial Revolution and Taylorism. The idea that time is quite literally viewed as a fungible commodity.
Time is money.
Time is money. Therefore, the logic dictates that respecting someone's time by getting straight to the point is the ultimate form of professional respect. You are saving them seconds, which shows you value their day.
But I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
I want to look at this from the perspective of someone outside the U.S. If time is money and relentless directness is the ultimate respect, doesn't a sentence like, could you send me the report by Friday, border on outright rudeness?
In what way?
It feels so incredibly transactional. When I read an American corporate email, I can't help but compare it to a fast food drive-thru.
A fast food drive-thru.
Yeah.
That's an interesting analogy. Expand on that. How does that map onto corporate communication?
Well, think about the architecture of a drive-thru. It is built entirely for speed, volume, and efficiency, right?
Right.
You pull your car up, you state your demand to a glowing box, I want a burger and fries, you hand over your card, and you drive away with your calories. It is highly efficient.
Yeah.
But if you just pull up to the speaker box and scream the word burger, you're a jerk.
Oh, definitely.
You are treating the worker poorly. Even in this hyper-efficient transaction, you still need a thin, almost microscopic layer of social lubrication. You still need the veneer of politeness. You have to say, can I get a burger, please? And you have to say thank you when they hand you the greasy paper bag.
I see where you're going.
Yeah, American emails seem to operate exactly like that drive-thru. It's built for speed. It's undeniably a transaction, but you still have to sprinkle please, and I appreciate it, to not sound like a sociopath.
That is a remarkably accurate, highly functional analogy. You're describing the exact tension between transaction and relationship. And it perfectly aligns with the advanced vocabulary highlighted in our source material.
That's it.
Yeah. The transcript specifically isolates 2 C2 level English words to describe this exact phenomenon: innocuous and veneer.
Oh, let's dig into those words, because understanding them feels like unlocking a cheat code for the listener.
Let's start with innocuous.
Right.
Linguistically, it means not harmful or offensive, harmless.
Oh.
So an email opening like, "Hi, Sarah," seems entirely innocuous. It looks like almost nothing is happening socially. But underneath, it carries massive cultural weight.
Because of the flattened hierarchy.
Exactly. By using "Hi, Sarah" instead of "Dear Miss Connor," you are establishing a flattened hierarchy. You are implicitly saying, we are equals, we are on the same team, and we are rolling up our sleeves to get the job done. The casualness is an engineered strategy to reduce friction.
That's wild. And then we have the word veneer, which is so evocative. Like in woodworking, a veneer is a very thin, attractive layer of high-quality wood that covers up cheaper, rougher material underneath.
Right.
It's a surface appearance that hides the structural reality.
And the source notes that in American emails, politeness acts as a veneer over demanding requests.
The burger.
Yes, the burger. The structural reality of the email is a raw demand. Give me the report, do the work. But the words please, thank you, hope you had a good weekend, and I'd appreciate it, form that necessary veneer.
Got it.
It allows the communication to be relentlessly direct without triggering the recipient's defensive reflexes. It is, as the text describes it, direct but cordial.
It's the paradox of polite efficiency. We want you to be brief, but we demand that you be nice about being brief.
Exactly.
And if you get that balance wrong, the penalties are subtle but severe. Like if you're too polite, you're viewed as inefficient, slow, maybe a bit naive. But if you're too efficient and drop the veneer entirely, you're viewed as aggressive, hard to work with, or uncollaborative.
It is an incredibly tightrope to walk every single time you hit send. And, the stakes only get higher as you move away from the keyboard.
Oh boy.
Because that underlying directness in written communication is really just the warm-up. It drastically shapes how people interact face-to-face, especially when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
Which brings us to our second segment, the thorny, deeply uncomfortable issue of performance evaluations and feedback.
The feedback minefield.
The feedback minefield. This is where the culture shock really hits its absolute peak for anyone new to this environment, because there's this massive, globally recognized misconception out there about Americans.
That they're always friendly?
Yes. If you watch American television or visit as a tourist, Americans seem incredibly friendly, almost aggressively friendly. They smile at strangers on the sidewalk. They make casual small talk in the grocery store checkout line. The barista asks how your day is going like they actually care.
Sociologists actually often refer to this as the peach culture versus the coconut culture.
Peach versus coconut.
Yeah, so Americans are peaches. They have a very soft, sweet, approachable exterior. You can pierce the outer layer immediately. You can become, quote-unquote, friends with an American in 5 minutes at a bus stop.
Right. So the logical assumption, and our source material points this out perfectly, is that because Americans are so outwardly soft and friendly, their negative feedback in the workplace will be equally gentle.
You'd think so, yeah.
You assume they're going to soften the blow, maybe talk around the issue, or sandwich the criticism in overwhelming praise so your feelings don't get hurt.
But once you bite into the peach, you hit the pit.
And the pit is rock hard.
Exactly. The reality of American corporate feedback is a completely different animal than the grocery store small talk. Our sources introduce a concept that has become practically gospel in modern management.
Oh, radical candor.
Yes. Popularized by former Google and Apple executive Kim Scott. Radical candor.
It sounds like a punk rock band, honestly, but it's actually a management philosophy.
It has become a foundational pillar, particularly in American tech hubs, finance sectors, and modern startups. The core philosophy, as explicitly defined by the text, is caring personally while challenging directly.
Let's break down the specific example given in the transcript, because seeing it in action is quite stark. Imagine you just finished a big quarterly review presentation. A manager utilizing radical candor will sit you down, look you in the eye, and say, I really value your contributions to the team, but I noticed your presentation lacked concrete data to support your conclusions. Let's work on tightening that up for next time.
Mm-hmm. What is genuinely fascinating here is how violently jarring this can be for an international professional, sure, or really anyone who isn't steeped in this specific corporate rhetoric.
Oh, I bet.
In many cultures around the world, criticism is delivered with extreme, almost agonizing subtlety. It's heavily coded. Or it's delivered entirely in private, sometimes even through a third party or a senior colleague, just to ensure no one loses face in the moment.
So if you were from a culture where saving face is paramount, that manager's feedback might look totally different.
Completely different.
Like the manager might just praise the font choices and the slide design of the presentation and completely ignore the lack of data. And the unwritten rule there is that you are expected to realize entirely on your own that their deafening silence regarding your data means your data was garbage.
That expectation of reading between the lines is a huge component of global business. But in the American model of radical candor, relying on hints is seen as a failure of leadership.
Wow.
Yeah, brutal directness is not framed as an insult. It is actively, aggressively framed as a positive thing. It is gifted to you as an opportunity for growth.
A gift.
Right. The underlying assumption the manager is making is, if I didn't care about your career trajectory, I wouldn't waste my breath telling you that your presentation was flawed. I'm telling you this because I care personally.
Oh, wait, I have to stop you here because I really want to push back on this entire framework.
Right.
Put yourself in the shoes of the listener right now. I'm listening to this concept of radical candor, and a very cynical part of me wonders, is radical candor just a highly convenient, HR-approved excuse to be mean? I mean, if my boss is smiling at me but telling me my work is fundamentally useless, isn't that just psychological warfare? Is it just a shield for managers to be bullies and say, hey, I'm not a jerk, I'm just being radically candid, I'm giving you a gift?
That is a very astute, highly critical question, and frankly, it's a trap that thousands of poorly trained managers fall into every single day.
So they do weaponize it.
They absolutely use the phrase as a weapon. But to master this culture, we have to differentiate between true radical candor, which is constructive, and data-driven, and actual hostility masked as candor.
Okay, what's the difference?
True radical candor is deeply tied to objective, observable facts. Look closely at the phrasing in the source's example. Your presentation lacked concrete data.
It's specific to the object.
Precisely. It didn't say you are a lazy worker. It didn't say you are a terrible public speaker. It targets the output, never the identity of the creator.
Ah, I see the distinction. It challenges the artifact on the table, not the soul of the person who made it.
Yes. And the crucial survival skill here, the unwritten rule that our listener must internalize, is that the recipient must absolutely never, under any circumstances, take the critique personally.
Never.
Never. In American corporate culture, getting defensive, crossing your arms, tearing up, or aggressively arguing when presented with data-driven criticism is seen as a severe, almost fatal lack of professionalism.
So what are you supposed to do?
You're expected to absorb the blow, nod thoughtfully, thank them for the feedback, and pivot immediately to fixing the problem.
You have to surgically separate your ego from your output. Your presentation isn't you. It's just a thing you manufactured. And if the thing you manufactured is broken, you don't cry over it. You just grab a wrench and fix it.
Exactly.
But taking that feedback with a smile, day in and day out, requires an incredibly thick skin. It requires you to be in a state of constant adaptation, constantly growing, constantly pivoting based on this blunt feedback.
And the cognitive load of that constant adaptation is immense.
Which brings us to a massive, glaring question. If you are constantly expected to grow, pivot, optimize yourself, and absorb this relentless, radical candor, when are you actually allowed to stop working?
The great American dilemma.
Exactly. Which transitions us perfectly into our third segment, the myth of a monolithic work-life balance.
It really is a myth.
Because if you look at job postings right now, you hear this phrase constantly. Every single company claims they offer it. Every recruiter promises it on LinkedIn. It's plastered on the career pages right next to photos of ping pong tables.
Work-life balance is arguably the most overused, diluted, and profoundly misunderstood phrase in the American corporate lexicon. And as our source material explicitly points out, the reality of this concept is wildly inconsistent across different sectors.
So there isn't one rule.
No. To assume there is a single American standard for when you clock out is to invite disaster.
The transcript breaks this down into basically two opposing realities, two different universes operating in the same country. Let's look at the first one. The 24/7 culture. We are talking about top-tier management consulting firms, investment banking on Wall Street, and hyper-growth venture-backed startups. In these environments, answering emails at 11 p.m. on a Friday or logging on to finish a deck on a Sunday morning isn't just normalized. The transcript uses a very specific, very powerful word here. It says this behavior is valorized.
Valorized. We really need to linger on that word because it explains the entire psychology of this sector.
Okay.
To valorize something means to treat it with reverence, to assign it heroic, almost moral value. In those specific industries, the total destruction of work-life balance isn't a secret shame that HR tries to hide. It is a badge of honor.
Wow.
It's the defining feature of the culture. Giving up your weekend is how you prove your absolute dedication. It's how you signal your fitness to secure a place in the inner circle.
But why does that exist, though? Is it just venture capital pressure? Is it the gamification of work?
It's a combination of enormous financial stakes, the mythos of the American self-made founder, and structural design. In an environment where the company might run out of money in 6 months, every hour feels existential.
That makes sense.
The culture demands total sacrifice because the margin for error is perceived to be zero.
But then you flip the coin completely, and the text highlights the opposite end of the spectrum, what we might call the boundary culture.
Yes, very different.
Think of government jobs, municipal public education, and certain mature, highly profitable tech companies that have very aggressive, entrenched human resources policies. In these environments, sending a Slack message to your team at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday isn't seen as heroic at all. It is actively frowned upon.
In those boundary cultures, the sociology flips entirely. Overworking doesn't make you look like a hero. It might actually signal to management that you are inefficient. Yeah, if you have to work at 8 p.m., the assumption is that you can't manage your time properly during normal business hours. Or worse, by sending that 8 p.m. email, you are creating a toxic environment for your peers by setting an unreasonable, unsanctioned precedent. You are disturbing the peace.
Okay, put yourself in my shoes as the listener for a second. Let's play out a hypothetical scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
I am week 2 at a mid-level marketing firm. It's not a crazy startup, but it's not a slow-moving government agency either. It's right in the messy middle. I read the employee handbook during orientation, and it explicitly says, we value our employees' well-being and encourage a strict 5 p.m. log-off. But on Tuesday at 5 p.m., I see my boss pack up and leave while my 4 immediate peers stay at their desks grinding until 7 p.m. Whose behavior do I copy?
This is the ultimate test of cultural literacy. If we connect this to the bigger picture, your scenario highlights the extreme danger of taking an employee handbook at face value.
Because it's a lie.
Well, a handbook is a legal document. It is drafted by corporate lawyers designed to protect the company from liability and burnout lawsuits. It is emphatically not an anthropological guide to the company's true, lived culture.
I've always felt that the official employee handbook is basically a glossy tourist brochure.
A tourist brochure.
Yeah, you know those brochures you get at the airport kiosk? They show pristine beaches, happy families, and everything looks perfect. But actually surviving the city requires something else entirely.
That's brilliant. And the source material offers a brilliant piece of advice for navigating this exact scenario.
Yeah.
Encapsulated in a C2 level idiom. Read the room.
Read the room. It's like skipping the tourist brochure, going to a dimly lit dive bar, and getting the real gritty advice from a local who has lived there for 20 years.
Yeah.
They tell you which neighborhoods are actually safe and where the food won't make you sick.
Exactly. To survive your scenario, you cannot rely on the stated policy. You must rely on meticulously observed behavior. You have to become a corporate anthropologist.
Watch the actions, not the words.
You watch the actions. Does your manager leave at 5 p.m. but then secretly respond to emails at 9 p.m.? If so, the unwritten rule is that FaceTime in the office doesn't matter, but digital availability is paramount.
Or what about the peers?
Right. Why are your peers staying until 7 p.m.? Are they working on a special project, or is there an unspoken culture of performative presenteeism? Observing actual behavior and aligning yourself with the hidden incentive structures is the only reliable survival mechanism.
So you have to constantly study the tribe. You have to map the hidden power structures. But here's the most frustrating catch for anyone listening. Let's say you figure it out.
Okay.
Whether you are grinding away in that 11 p.m. startup culture or strictly adhering to the 6 p.m. boundaries of a government job, hard work alone is not enough. You can put your head down, do incredible work, generate massive value, and it will not get you promoted in America.
No, it will not. And this is perhaps the most painful, disillusioning lesson for many professionals entering this space. Competence is expected, but it is not automatically rewarded.
You have to prove it.
You have to actively, strategically prove your worth when review time comes around.
Which brings us to segment 4, and frankly, the most uncomfortable topic for so many people. The art of the humble brag, or the absolute necessity of self-promotion. Our source material highlights a massive, deeply ingrained cultural clash regarding the concept of humility.
It is a profound philosophical clash. In a vast majority of global cultures, and indeed in many regional cultures within the U.S., humility is held up as a paramount moral virtue.
It's a good thing.
Right. Boasting about your own accomplishments is considered crass, distasteful, and indicative of a severe character flaw. The expectation, which is drilled into people from childhood, is that if you do good, honest work, your superiors will naturally notice your diligence and reward you accordingly. Underselling oneself is the polite, socially expected norm.
Right. It's the instinct to deflect praise. Like, oh, the project was a success, but it was nothing special. The team did all the heavy lifting. I just played a small part.
But in the U.S. corporate ecosystem, deploying that mindset during a performance review is a quiet career killer. The transcript puts it with brutal clarity. If you don't fiercely advocate for yourself, nobody else will.
But why is that, though? Is it just because American managers are selfish?
Not necessarily selfish, but structurally overwhelmed.
How so?
American management structures are increasingly horizontal and stretched incredibly thin. A mid-level manager is often juggling dozens of direct reports, a calendar full of back-to-back meetings, and their own immense pressure to deliver metrics to their superiors. They are not keeping a secret, detailed diary of every single brilliant contribution you have made over a 12-month period.
They just don't have the time.
They simply do not have the cognitive bandwidth to track your greatness.
Think about your last performance review as a listener. Did you walk into that room and wait for your manager to list your accomplishments? If you did, you likely left money on the table. Because if you play the humble card, expecting them to connect the dots, you're just going to get a completely average rating. You have to hand them the narrative on a silver platter. You have to do the marketing for your own career.
Yes, you must provide them with the exact ammunition they need to justify promoting you or giving you a raise when they have to fight for budget in front of the VP.
Ammunition, I like that.
And the source text doesn't just tell you to boast. It provides a highly engineered, universally accepted mechanism for doing this effectively. The STAR method.
The STAR method.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this and you haven't heard of it, write this down. This is the ultimate cheat code for corporate self-promotion. STAR is an acronym. Situation, task, action, result.
Let's workshop this. Let's look at how someone might fail at this and then walk through the exact, highly effective example provided in the transcript.
Okay, give me a failure first.
Imagine an engineer who fixed a massive software bug. If they go into a review and just say, I worked really hard on fixing the database this quarter, that means nothing.
It's too vague.
It's vague, it's subjective, and it doesn't quantify value.
So how do we run that through the STAR machine?
First, the situation. You are setting the scene, outlining the existential threat or the business problem. The source's example is, our Q3 sales were declining due to inefficiencies.
Short, sweet, and establishes the stakes. It creates drama. Then the task. What was your specific, individualized responsibility in this mess? I was tasked with identifying the bottleneck in our outreach.
Next is the action. This is where you describe the specific, active steps you took to solve the problem, not the team, you. I audited our process and implemented a new automated CRM system.
And finally, the absolute most important part, the result. The tangible, measurable, undeniable outcome, which resulted in a 23% increase in conversion rates over 2 months.
Situation, task, action, result. It transforms a vague feeling of working hard into a compelling, undeniable narrative of value creation.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We are talking about the paradox of self-promotion. To an international worker, or anyone raised to be deeply humble, sitting in a room with your boss and saying, I implemented a system that boosted our sales by 23% feels like gross arrogance.
It feels terrible to say.
Feels like you're strutting around the room like a peacock, but the source explicitly says that to an American manager, this is not viewed as arrogance at all. It is viewed as expected professionalism. How on earth do we reconcile that massive disconnect?
It comes down to how American corporate culture distinguishes between objective truth and subjective ego.
Okay, explain that.
If you walk into a review and say, I'm the smartest person on this entire floor, I'm a natural-born leader, and I work harder than everyone else combined, that is viewed as gross arrogance, even in the most cutthroat American office. Because those are subjective, unprovable, ego-driven claims.
Ah, okay. The ego is the problem, not the achievement.
Exactly. The beauty of the STAR method is that it relies entirely on quantifiable metrics. A 23% increase in conversion rates is not an opinion. It is an objective mathematical fact.
The numbers do the talking.
The data acts as a cultural translator. It strips away the emotional layer of boasting and leaves only the empirical value. By presenting objective results, you aren't actually bragging. You are simply reporting the factual history of your impact.
You are acting as a journalist, reporting on your own success. That makes total sense. You are basically writing the justification memo for them. You're giving your boss the exact numbers they need to slide across the table when they demand a higher budget for your department.
Exactly.
But as we all know, you can't just rely on a yearly performance review to advocate for yourself. A year is a very long time in corporate America. You can't just emerge from your cubicle once every 365 days, drop a 23% conversion rate on the desk, and retreat back into the shadows.
No, absolutely not. Advocacy is not an annual event. It is a continuous daily process.
Which means you need a daily audience. You need advocates who know your name before review season even starts. And that brings us to segment 5, the arena that fills people with the most existential dread: office politics.
Oh, office politics. Just saying the phrase aloud instantly triggers a physiological stress response in a lot of people.
I'm sweating a little bit just saying it.
They associate it with the worst parts of human nature. They think of Machiavellian scheming, backstabbing, whispering in the shadows, and unfair favoritism where the charismatic slacker gets promoted over the quiet genius.
Right, it's the cynical idea that it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Exactly. But the source material challenges us to completely redefine that concept. In a functioning American workplace, politics isn't inherently evil. It is simply the necessary building of what the text calls relationship capital.
Relationship capital. I love that term. It frames your professional network like a bank account that you have to make deposits into before you can make a withdrawal.
That is a perfect way to look at it. Let me offer another analogy. Think of your career like a complex algorithm, similar to a search engine.
Like Google.
Like Google. Your technical competence, your hard work, your late nights, that is the content on your website. It's necessary. But relationship capital, that is your SEO. That is your search engine optimization.
Oh, wow.
It represents the backlinks from other departments pointing to your value.
Yeah.
If you don't build those backlinks by networking and gaining visibility, leadership will never find your page, no matter how good the content is.
Because the reality of corporate America is that the most important decisions about your life, your promotions, your project assignments, whether you survive a round of layoffs, your annual bonuses, are almost entirely made in rooms that you are not invited into.
Let that sink in for a second, because it is the harsh truth of corporate life. The biggest decisions of your career are made behind closed doors by people who might only recognize your name from a spreadsheet while you're sitting at your desk completely oblivious.
Therefore, the core question of office politics isn't about backstabbing. The core question is, who advocates for you when you aren't in the room? If your manager is fighting to get you a promotion and the VP of marketing looks at the list and says, "I've never even heard of this person. What do they even do here?" The promotion is dead in the water.
So how do you build that relationship capital? How do you improve your career SEO? The transcript gives some very strategic, actionable steps. And it's all based around this concept of visibility as currency.
Visibility is currency. It means intentionally making sure people outside of your immediate day-to-day team know who you are and what value you bring.
The source lists several tactical ways to execute this. Grabbing a 15-minute virtual coffee with colleagues across different departments just to understand their workflow.
Just chatting.
Just chatting. Asking thoughtful, non-combative questions in large all-hands meetings so senior leadership hears your voice and associates you with engagement. Volunteering for cross-functional task forces where you get to collaborate with people you normally wouldn't interact with.
Getting your name out there.
It's about systematically getting your face, your temperament, and your work in front of as many stakeholders as possible.
But, and this is a massive caveat, perhaps the single most important warning we will issue in the entire deep dive today, there is a dark side to this relationship building. While you are out there grabbing coffees, asking questions, and building your visibility, you must be acutely aware of the extreme fragility of your reputation.
The text mentions a strict, unbending rule. Never engage in gossip or bad-mouthing.
Which, on the surface, sounds incredibly obvious. It sounds like kindergarten advice. Don't say mean things about people. But I think there's a specific, highly dangerous psychological trap here specifically within the American workplace.
There absolutely is, and it routes directly back to our earlier discussion about the casual veneer of American offices. Because your coworkers use slang, because the CEO wears jeans and sneakers, because people talk about their weekend hiking trips and treat you like a buddy, you can very, very easily be tricked into dropping your professional guard.
Yes. The casualness lulls you into a false sense of security. You feel like you're just complaining about the boss with a buddy at a bar, rather than speaking to a colleague in an at-will employment environment where you could be fired tomorrow.
Exactly. The compartmentalization of the American self is complex. You might vent about a frustrating project or make a snide, sarcastic comment about another colleague's incompetence, assuming it's just harmless venting between equals. You think you are building rapport through shared grievance.
Bond over a common enemy.
Right. But the American workplace, beneath the jeans and the ping pong tables, is still a highly competitive, ruthlessly capitalist environment. Gossip destroys trust instantly. If you develop a reputation as someone who is negative or someone who badmouths colleagues when they aren't around, it will absolutely torpedo your career trajectory.
Because the logic is simple. If you'll gossip to them about someone else, you will inevitably gossip about them to someone else. It makes you a social liability.
Yeah.
So you have to be visible. You have to be outwardly friendly and engaged, but you must remain intensely, fiercely professional at your core. It's that tightrope again. The friendly facade over the rigid professional boundaries.
It is a constant negotiation of boundaries.
All right, so we've covered the overarching philosophies. We've talked about the psychology of the fast food email, the emotional detachment required for radical candor, the narrative engineering of the STAR method, and the SEO of relationship capital. For our final segment, let's zoom all the way in.
Yeah, onto the details.
Let's look at the microscopic daily interactions that can make or break a career. The source text provides a rapid-fire survival guide of do's and don'ts for American office culture.
These are the tactical, everyday maneuvers that demonstrate your cultural fluency on a micro level.
Let's start with small talk, which is practically an Olympic sport in the U.S. The transcript says, do ask colleagues about their weekend plans. It builds necessary rapport, but don't ask about age, salary, politics, or religion, especially initially.
Right.
Now, I have to ask you to break this down. From an outside perspective, this seems entirely arbitrary. Why is it perfectly fine and even encouraged to ask what someone did on Saturday, but asking who they voted for or what their rent is a career-ending landmine? What are the actual boundaries of safe American small talk?
It comes down to the deep-seated American desire for a frictionless operational environment, combined with the strict legalities of modern HR.
Frictionless.
Right. Asking about the weekend is an invitation for the person to share safe, highly curated personal details. I took my kids to the park. I watched a movie. I tried a new restaurant. It humanizes you. It makes you a 3D person rather than a robot without introducing any actual conflict.
It's the veneer of intimacy without actual intimacy.
Precisely. But age, salary, politics, and religion, those are inherently tied to identity, status, socioeconomic class, and deeply held moral beliefs.
They're heavy.
They're too heavy. In a highly diverse workforce, introducing those topics is practically guaranteed to create friction, discomfort, or worse, legal liabilities regarding discrimination. The American workplace prioritizes smooth operational functioning over deep, potentially divisive personal connections. You're there to work, not to debate philosophy.
Keep it light, keep it moving. Okay, next rule. Do speak up in meetings, even if you are junior. The text says silence equals disengagement, but don't interrupt.
This is a phenomenally tricky balance for many international professionals, particularly from cultures with strong power distances.
What's the norm there?
In highly hierarchical cultures, a junior employee speaking unprompted in a meeting with senior executives is viewed as wildly disrespectful, insubordinate, and arrogant. You speak only when explicitly spoken to by an elder or superior.
But in the U.S. context.
In the U.S., if you sit through a 1-hour strategy meeting and say absolutely nothing, the assumption isn't that you're being respectful.
It's the opposite.
The assumption is that you are either entirely zoned out, you have no valuable ideas to contribute, or you lack the basic confidence required for the job. You are expected to contribute to the marketplace of ideas.
You have to play the game.
However, you must wait for a natural pause in the conversation. If you do accidentally step on someone's words, which happens constantly, especially on Zoom where audio lags, the script offers a perfect C2 level diffusion tactic. You stop immediately and say, "Sorry, please go ahead."
Sorry, please go ahead.
It acknowledges the interruption, apologizes briefly, and immediately yields the floor back to the other person.
It is polite efficiency in action. It repairs the social tear instantly without derailing the meeting.
Okay, here's another one. Do embrace American optimism.
Yeah.
Using phrases like, "That's a great idea," even when you see flaws.
Yes. Cynicism, no matter how intellectually rigorous, is rarely rewarded in American corporate culture. Americans love a can-do attitude.
Even if the idea is bad. Even if a colleague's idea is fundamentally flawed, The cultural expectation is to start with enthusiastic validation before offering a pivot. It's essentially the yes and principle of theatrical improvisation applied to business strategy. You validate the effort before you critique the execution.
Okay, the final point in the rapid fire guide, and I think this might be my absolute favorite takeaway from the entire document, the I don't know strategy.
Oh, this is crucial.
The transcript notes that Americans deeply respect intellectual honesty over bluffing. If you get caught bluffing, your credibility is destroyed. And it gives the specific C2 survival phrase to use when a boss asks you a question you don't know the answer to. I don't have the data on hand, but I'll circle back with you by EOD.
That single phrase is an absolute masterclass in American corporate communication. It is a perfectly engineered sentence. Let's dissect it.
Let's do it. Tear it apart.
First, I don't have the data on hand. Notice what it doesn't say.
It doesn't say, I don't know.
Exactly. It doesn't say, I don't know. It admits a lack of immediate knowledge, but it frames it as a temporary logistical issue, not a fundamental lack of competence.
Okay.
It implies the data exists and you know how to get it. It's just not physically in front of you right this second.
Right. It sounds infinitely more professional and capable than just shrugging your shoulders and looking confused.
Then the second clause, but I'll circle back with you. Circling back is a classic, almost cliche piece of corporate jargon, but it persists because it is highly effective.
It is everywhere.
It promises a proactive follow-up. It shows the manager that you take their questions seriously, and more importantly, you are taking ownership of finding the answer. You aren't passing the buck.
And finally, the landing. By EOD, end of day.
Exactly. It sets a specific, measurable timeline for the resolution. In one single fluid sentence, you have admitted ignorance without losing face, taken full operational responsibility, and established a firm deadline for delivery.
It's brilliant.
It projects supreme confidence and reliability, even in a moment of vulnerability. It is verbal judo. It is far, far better than guessing, giving bad information, and being proven wrong later, which destroys your relationship capital permanently.
Verbal judo. You take a moment of weakness, a moment where you could look incompetent, and you use their momentum to flip it into a demonstration of your rock-solid reliability.
That is the very essence of cultural literacy, knowing exactly how to deploy the right phrasing at the exact right moment to maintain and grow your professional capital.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by looking at that blank rulebook, the professional vertigo of entering a new culture, and I genuinely feel like we've written a few crucial chapters for the listener today.
I hope so.
To synthesize everything we've pulled from this fascinating ESL source document, Mastering the American Workplace really rests on three core non-negotiable pillars.
The three pillars of cultural literacy.
First, directness. Whether it's cutting the fluff out of your emails to respect someone's time, or absorbing the data-driven blows of radical candor without taking it personally, directness wrapped in a thin veneer of politeness is the baseline.
Right.
Second, self-advocacy. Recognizing that modesty will leave you invisible. You have to use objective frameworks like the STAR method to report your successes. It is expected professionalism, not arrogance.
Crucial.
And third, relationship building. Understanding that hard work happens at your desk, but promotions happen in the hallways. You have to build visibility and relationship capital, your career SEO, while fiercely guarding your reputation against the toxic pull of gossip.
It is a highly complex, sometimes contradictory ecosystem, but it is one that can absolutely be decoded and mastered once you understand the underlying sociological logic.
Exactly, and that is why we do this. To you, the listener, whether you are logging on for your first day at a startup or you've been at your firm for a decade, remind yourself that mastering these cultural codes is the ultimate difference between simply clocking in and out and actively thriving.
Without a doubt.
Competence is what gets you through the door. Competence gets you hired. But cultural literacy is what gets you promoted. It's what gets you the budget. It's what gets you into the room where the decisions are made.
Beautifully summarized. Knowledge is most valuable when it is deeply understood and practically applied. And today, we've hopefully given you the tools to apply it.
But before we let you go, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. Something for you to ponder on your own as you navigate your next Zoom meeting or as you draft your next email to your boss.
Oh, here we go.
We've spent this entire deep dive establishing how absolutely undeniably essential these unwritten rules are for your survival. You need radical candor to grow. You need the STAR method to get paid what you're worth. You need relationship capital to survive layoffs. You need to know how to read the room to avoid burnout.
Right.
If these tools are so critical to success, Why do companies intentionally leave them out of the orientation handbooks in the first place?
That is the ultimate question.
Think about that blank rule book we talked about at the start. If management knows the game is won through office politics, visibility, and self-advocacy, why do they hand you a corporate rule book that only talks about the dress code and the vacation policy?
It's a huge disconnect.
What does the very existence of unwritten rules actually say about the true nature of corporate gatekeeping? Are they quietly testing your intuition? Or is the system subtly designed to keep certain outsiders out?
That is a profound question and one that highlights the true power dynamics at play.
Keep observing, keep reading the room, keep decoding the game. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.